Mr. Chicken Lands on London by Leigh Hobbs. Let's check the blurb to find out a little bit about the story. Mr. Chicken can't wait another minute, so he finishes his breakfast, collects his camera and flies to London. He wants to see everything. Join Mr. Chicken and let him show you his favourite city in the whole world. Mr. Chicken couldn't wait another minute, so he finished his breakfast, collected his camera and flew to London. London was his favourite city in the whole world. After drifting over Regent Street, he floated down through the clouds, past the Houses of Parliament, before landing ever so gently right in the River Thames. Luckily, his camera was waterproof and the Savoy Hotel, where he always stayed, was just around the corner. "Good morning," said Mr. Chicken. "I have a reservation." "Certainly, sir," said Morris, the man at the desk. "Welcome back. Your favourite room is ready." When in London, Mr. Chicken stayed in the Riverview Deluxe room, where he could look at London while enjoying his breakfast in bed. It was still early, so he ordered a full English breakfast, then planned his day and made a list. Mr. Chicken loved looking up facts and figures about his favourite city. He never got sick of learning new things. Later, outside, a lost, teary tourist asked for directions. Mr. Chicken was happy to help, for it made him feel like a real Londoner. First on his list was a visit to a special friend. Whenever he was in town, Mr. Chicken called on Her Majesty the Queen. Of course, he always rang first, so that Her Majesty had time to do some extra baking. "Oh, Mr. Chicken, how lovely to hear from you," the Queen said. "Do pop in for morning tea." And so he did. At Buckingham Palace, Mr. Chicken was on his best behaviour. He took extra care not to break the furniture. After morning tea, the Queen suggested stepping onto the balcony. "The view is absolutely marvellous, Mr. Chicken, as you well know." "I'd love to." It was very nice indeed. However, Mr. Chicken had to keep an eye on the time. He had a lot to do before lunch. After the royal visit, Mr. Chicken checked his list in St. James's Park. He'd seen the changing of the guard before, so he decided to climb up St. Paul's Cathedral. Then he explored the Tower of London before crossing Tower Bridge. By now, Mr. Chicken was getting behind in his schedule, as tourists kept wanting him to take their photo. Even though Mr. Chicken was a VIP, he liked to blend in. He queued at bus stops and moved about on double-decker buses, just as ordinary Londoners do. If he was in a hurry, though, he drove the bus by himself. Of course, if Mr. Chicken was in a real hurry, he caught the Underground. He enjoyed riding on the escalators, especially if they took him to a favourite spot. For instance, Trafalgar Square, where Mr. Chicken sometimes spied on Lord Nelson standing atop his column. Today, as there was room for two and Lord Nelson didn't mind sharing, Mr. Chicken joined him to take in the view. He didn't stay long, as his tummy told him it was nearly time for lunch. Though he did manage to squeeze in a visit to the National Gallery. "No touching, please, sir," said a voice from behind. "Pardon me," said Mr. Chicken. With all that sightseeing, Mr. Chicken had to keep his strength up. Luckily, his good manners and VIP pass got him into very smart places for lunch. "More tea, sir?" asked Walter, the waiter. "Make it cake, please," answered the VIP. Straight after lunch, he was back on a bus. Mr. Chicken wanted to see everything. He even played I Spy on the London Eye. In fact, Mr. Chicken didn't stop until he found a place to perch at Piccadilly Circus. As usual, Mr. Chicken had overdone his London sightseeing, and by late afternoon he'd become much too excited. A short rest was needed back at the Savoy so he could freshen up. In no time at all, Mr. Chicken looked as good as ever, and was ready for dinner. "Vegetables, sir?" "Yes, please." "Lots." A meal down in the Crypt Cafe of San Martin in the Fields was a must for Mr. Chicken. He enjoyed it so much he was nearly late for the opera. In the middle of the first act, Mr. Chicken remembered he had to be somewhere else. By 9:15 exactly. He hurried down Whitehall to the clock tower near Parliament Square as Big Ben struck 9. At 9:10, Gerard the guard checked Mr. Chicken's VIP pass. "Yes, it's you all right, sir," he said, and waved him in. Up, up, up climbed Mr. Chicken. Tick, tick, tick went the giant clock. At exactly 9:15, Mr. Chicken felt as if he was right inside the beating heart of London. Exactly 9:15, Mr. Chicken was. Later, back at the hotel, sleep was impossible. Not that it mattered very much, for Mr. Chicken didn't want to waste a minute. So, as there was a full moon, he got up and went for a walk. At midnight, Mr. Chicken listened to Big Ben strike 12. At last he felt he had London all to himself. In the morning it was time to leave, but not before a full English breakfast. As always, Mr. Chicken said goodbye to London from Waterloo Bridge, and as usual he shed a tear. Not a big one, of course, for Mr. Chicken knew he would soon be back. The end.